Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me clearly. My name is Michael Nias. I am an attorney as well as a clinical social worker. So I've been able to bridge the gap between law and social work. And that has been something I've been practicing for the last 25 years. So I tried to get up and tell myself that now I'm just in the field of medicine. But my friends and colleagues tell me, oh no, you're a lawyer. You can never get that stain washed off of you. Well, it's not that bad, the stain. I thought it was just that I was born a person of color. But I understand that that really is just the stain that comes from being in the field of law. So I understand we have a couple of hundred people with the same stain on it. I hope yours is not as deep as mine, but otherwise that means you're going around as a black man. I thought I was white all my life, and then all of a sudden I found out this stain didn't wash off. But I want to approach this not as a professor or from a professorial perspective, because those days are gone for me. I was in the, I don't know if you've seen a little bio, but I was in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Florida. And I was an assistant professor there, as well as the clinical director of the Florida Recovery Program, which is a substance abuse and mental health program for the majority of the patients in that program are in the medical profession. So, and every aspect of the medical, whether you be a vet or whether you would be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a nurse, every aspect of the medical profession. It's a residential program and has about 50 patients on average, sometimes as high as 80. During this pandemic, it's probably a little higher because actually substance abuse, the use of substances, it has gone up tremendously. I would like to think of this not as a lecture, but more as a colloquium where we're just sitting down and speaking about these issues without having documented where all the references came from, and those things that normally are a part of academia. But the big question here that we will talk about today, and I will leave time if people want to ask questions, I will leave some time for that so that I can help people leave here feeling that they got the most out of this talk in this little colloquium. So the question to begin this talk is substance abuse in the legal profession. And this is what I call, whether it's the chicken or the egg, what came first? Did our lawyers just inherently, and the lawyering profession, does that lead to issues around substance abuse and mental health? Or is it something that started earlier, in law school? Are law students coming into the profession? Are law students already carrying that burden before they even came to law school? Or did they acquire it in law school and then carry that moving forward into the legal profession. So since I have gone to law school, I'm going to ask some questions through using the Socratic method. So I will ask a question and then I'll give you time to like ponder the answer and then try to answer the question in which I ask. Now, my background, both in law and mental health, I was very, very fortunate in that I was mentored by outstanding individuals in both professions. And I feel very blessed and highly favored because of those things. I went to the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law in New York City, where I studied sports and entertainment law. And I came out of there representing professional athletes. So that is the legal side. On the clinical side, after having represented athletes for a number of years, I became disenchanted with probably the rigors of the profession. And so after about 10 years, 15 years, I divested myself and went into academia. And so at that point, I was a member of the dean's staff at Providence College, which is like the little engine that could. They participated in the Big East. And as a part of the dean's staff, I was responsible for the academics of all the athletes. And I would say while I was there, basketball was the revenue sport. And I was responsible for a basketball team that eventually had about 3 to 5 professional athletes on that team. And the claim to fame for Providence, which I really took a lot of pride in, was the fact that all their athletes that went into the professional ranks, or even almost all their athletes playing in period, graduated from college with a degree. It was at Providence where I was introduced to the clinical side or the medical side of the business, because they had a bachelor of social work program. And I had a Paul on the Damascus Road moment when I had an athlete that was a world-class athlete, an Olympic class athlete, who through some clinical issues wound up dropping out of college. And I thought that was a tremendous waste of talent. And I then went to talk to some people in the Bachelor of Social Work program and asked them if I could take some classes that would prepare me to help these type of situations. Well, just a short synopsis of what the woman's situation was. She was a child of a Black mother and a white father. And her mother was a substance abuser and had a terrible, terrible addiction. So she was really raised by her father, who was a boxer. And the problem with that was that we had this young Black girl being raised by a healthy athletic father who then taught her and supported her becoming a world-class athlete. So when she got to college, there were a couple of issues. One was around gender, and the other was around identity. So in the medical field or psychiatric field, we call those family of origin issues. And she was really thrown for a loop when she wound up going out with a young man who was from Ireland. And this young man, even though he was from out of the country and came from a completely different culture, actually knew more about Black history than she did. So all these issues are rolling around in this young woman's head, in which she couldn't find answers to. I tried to get her engaged with the clinical or psychological staff at the college, but they couldn't engage with her. And she wound up, to her detriment, dropping out of college and went on to become a nanny in North Carolina, which impacted me terribly because I thought it was a tremendous waste of talent. So that's when I switched over from the legal field into the medical field. But as you can see, I still haven't been able to wash that legal stain off of me, as my clients clearly point out to me all the time. So moving forward, I have always been about bridging the legal and the mental health side. And so throughout my career, that's what I tried to do. I have worked for several federal agencies. I've worked for Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I have worked for U.S. Customs. I have worked for Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency. All these I did prior to coming to University of Florida, where I was a director, a clinical director at the Florida Recovery Center. So that's enough about me, but what I want to talk about now is what came first. Who was the chicken or the egg? And that's a real issue when you look at the profession. Substance abuse runs rampant through our society, but it really has a stronghold, not a toehold, but a stronghold in the legal profession. And so how did that happen? Is it the people that come into the profession as law students and that's where they pick it up? Or is it about the art or the act of lawyering that becomes the issue? So this is just a question that's out there. And all of you can ask these questions of yourself. When did substance abuse first take a hold in your life? And if we look at our society, for most people working through substance abuse issues, those things came into their lives at a very early age. And by that, I mean adolescence. And we start drinking alcohol at the age of anywhere from 13 to 17 years old. Then we carry it on, through partying in college and fraternities and sororities and so on and so forth. And does that lead the foundation to the problems that they later on have in law school? So that's a part of that question. So one of the things when we look at that law students and lawyers suffer mental health issues at much higher rates than those of the general population. So law students suffer from alcohol, drug abuse, anxiety, depression. All that happens to them as law students. But were those issues a major issue for them before they even came to law school? We know that we have what we call the 3 Ds as a major issue with law students. That is that they are dissatisfied, demoralized, and depressed at a higher rate than any group of graduate students at the university. I want you to think about that. There's a higher rate of dissatisfaction. They are more demoralized and depressed at a higher rate than any group of graduate students on the college or university level. Now, why would that be? I want you to think about that. When did you start to feel these mental health issues impacting your life? Was it in law school, or was it after, when you started lawyering? Now, one of the issues that law students always complain about is the heavy and intense workload. And that starts from day one. I can remember that I thought personally that I could understand and do the legal work as a first-year law student. What I found extremely intense was something that most people don't think about, and that was the legal writing. Legal writing was a thorn under my seat, and that stemmed from the first time I started to do my first legal writing assignment. I submitted it, and then when I met with my law professor and I came and sat down with him and he pulled out my writing sample, I thought for sure that he had the wrong person, because somehow that was back in the day when they still had bottled ink, that he must have spilled a whole bottle of red ink on my writing sample. That was tremendously demoralizing to me. So that's where I got the first of my 3 Ds. I left out of there, and for the first time in my academic career, received a C. And I had never seen a C before on my papers in any of my academic works. So that was the start of me becoming dissatisfied, demoralized, and depressed. So when did it happen to all of you out there? When did it happen in law school? Or did you get through law school and it became an issue for you as you were in the profession doing the act of lawyering? They took a survey, of about 10,000 law students. The results of that survey was that 40% of the people who participated in this survey were depressed in the first year of law school. Think about that. That's a tremendously high number. 40% of a survey of thousands of law students were depressed after the first year. So what other behaviors, what other things were going on during that first year? So one of the things we have to look at is who comes to law school. What type of students set out on a college campus to end up at a university law school? Look at yourselves and ask yourself, what type of student were you that carried you to law school? Number one, you're a high achiever. Think about that. We're taking the best and the brightest into our law schools. A high achiever. What else would you say you were? Were you socially inept, or were you a character? Did you socialize with other students? So we have to look at what kind of students come into law school, and did they bring with them these qualities that led them to substance abuse and mental health issues. One of the things that we look at is that what characteristics lead to success in law school? So all of this is going towards this question of whether it is the study and the practice of law, which is the issue that leads to so many lawyers having issues with substance abuse and mental health. So now that we're in law school and everybody has the same first year, we have contracts, we have torts, we know the first year curriculum. But can you imagine that this curriculum leads to 40% being depressed at such an early stage of their legal training? So what do we do next? Now we're feeling behind. But you remember that the first time you step into the building of that law school, there are eyes that are on you. It is extremely competitive on every level. You sometimes work in small groups. Sometimes you find yourself in a cubicle by yourself, not willing to talk to anyone about what the issues are that are going on within your head. Why? Why don't you want to talk about those issues? Because of the stigma that is often attached to mental health and substance abuse issues. So then we take it upon ourselves to solve our own problems. Are we trained at that point to do that? Of course not. So then what do? If there happens to be an issue where our depression or substance abuse has impacted us negatively, we then turn often to drugs and alcohol to support our continued excellence in our academic endeavors. So that often leads to what we call study drugs. Now, what falls into that category of study drugs? There is, among many students, a disability, a psychiatric disability that we really don't hold the stigma for. And that deals with ADHD or ADD. And you can buy those drugs or get them prescribed for you on campus. Hyperactivity. So we wind up taking drugs like Adderall, Concerta, Vyvanse, and then the illegal drug that does the same as those study drugs, cocaine. Think about that. Have any of you used prescribed drugs or illegal drugs to help you do better? It helps combat fatigue, promote mental acuity, or even enhance memory, or we think it enhances memory. So now we have crutches that we're leaning on. And why do we use these study drugs? We use them because we don't consider them to be bad or not bad like illegal substances. So rather, it's okay to use Adderall or to buy it off your friend or to buy it off the street or Concerta or Vyvanse because they help us. But how many people at that point starting to need these study drugs? Because it is viewed as a weakness by students and professors and administrators to ask for help. So who seeks help? We have males seek help less than females. We have straight people seek help less than LGBT. We have students of color seek help less than white students. And then no matter what group you are in, if you are of a lower economic culture, that you seek help less than the affluent. So this is extremely important. Just think about that. Those groups, that's the totality of the population. And we do this because we don't ask for help. Because the stigma of asking for help, the stigma, we think that people in the profession that we're going into will look down upon us. So this all leads between heavy workloads, the pressure to compete, other aberrant behaviors, and the use of study drugs all sort of grease the slide that leads into the lawyering, right? The art and the act of lawyering. So does that mean that law school preceded the issues that thousands of us have in this profession? Did law school prep us for these issues? Now, we also haven't spoken about alcohol, which is also prevalent on college campuses. As a matter of fact, it's just as prevalent as the air we breathe. Some of us were in fraternities and sororities where the use of alcohol was rampant. We've seen deaths on campuses from fraternity and sorority parties, not so much sororities, but negative things have happened to women under the influence of alcohol. Some that may have felt like it was death. Some may have even felt like it was a fate worse than death. So we find out that alcohol is one of the most prevalent substances used during this time while in law school. But no one talks about it. They don't talk about it because it's legal. That's why they don't talk about prescribed drugs, because it's legal. However, there are law schools that made a concerted effort to support these students. If you look at a school here in Washington, D.C., and at Georgetown Law School, a highly ranked, highly pressured situation, they have in their dorm, there's a separate dorm for the law students. They have a resident psychologist in the building. The ABA, as well as the universities, have understood that something has to be done. Now, at the University of Pennsylvania, as with all legal law schools, where you have to take a professional responsibility course before you can graduate, Penn has inserted into this professional responsibility program a wellness program so that you can get yourself together before you even get in the practice of law. And this has been instituted by a number of universities around the country. It's a wellness program because they realize that coming out of law school, all these new lawyers are not well. And for the University of Pennsylvania, how can you be a good lawyer if you are not a healthy lawyer? Think about that. Health and wellness are an important part to becoming a good lawyer. The next thing we want to look at, we're leaving law school, so we're going to the art of lawyering. The art of lawyering, the practice of law. So what is it about the practice of law that promotes unhealthy behaviors? Let's think about it. The first thing that most young associates do when they come into the practice of law is they work anywhere from 60 to 80 hours in a week. Ask yourself, did you have to do that? And I think most of you, truthfully, will tell you, yes, you did. 60 to 80 hours a week. That's like 14-hour days. How do you get through 14-hour days? 12-hour days plus the weekend. 5 12-hour days is only 60 hours. Where do you get the next 20 hours if you're responsible for 80 hours a week at the firm? The other thing we have to look at is the pressure to develop clients or billable hours. Most people, when they come into a firm, have 1,500 to 2,000 billable hours a year. That's a tremendous amount of productivity. Or is it productivity? Do we have support for young attorneys coming into the field? Or are they put under the pressure cooker of starting and hitting that ground, running 0 to 60 instantly? So when do you take care of yourself? If you have a girlfriend, she's your only support. If you leave for work at 8 a.m. in the morning and you put in a 14-hour day, you'll be lucky to get home at 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. All you can do is de-escalate internally, get to sleep, get up the next morning, and do the same thing all over again. So is this where it all begins? Is this the real issue now that you got out of that pressure cooker called law school? Now you're out of the frying pan, but you're into the fire. But you're expected not only to produce, but you're expected to socialize with your colleagues. And what do we do when we socialize with our colleagues? We do what's legal, and that's when we wind up using alcohol. Alcohol probably is the number one legal substance abuse. Do you know that this country, not just lawyers, but in this country, we lose 500,000, think about that, 500,000 days of productivity to alcohol. An ABA survey of 13,000 lawyers found that 1 in 5 used alcohol to excess. 1 in 5. And that's not a small sample when you're talking about 13,000 lawyers. The other issue with being a young associate is that you have to constantly elevate within the firm. What happens if you don't? Then there's the pressure that the firm will drop you. So the stress, the strain, the tension, the anxiety, the depression is all ratchet up in order for you to keep your job. The annual elimination of people who don't keep up within the firm is a constant reminder that you either produce or you're gone. Beside that, you're constantly fighting for that desk in the sky, which is called partnership. In that survey of 13,000 lawyers conducted by the ABA, it stated that the first decade of practice, the first decade, 10 years, presents the highest likelihood for alcohol and substance abuse. The first decade, think about that, 10 years. 6 out of 10 lawyers reported anxiety. 5 out of 10 lawyers reported depression. Now hold on to your seats because this is the big one. 1 out of 9 lawyers had suicidal tendencies. What else are we dealing with? If you want to be successful, what about your own personal issues? What happens when you have to defend someone whose principles you abhor? What if you had to go out and defend the murderer? And you know he did. But from your good lawyering, you were able to get him free from those charges. So where does this substance abuse and alcohol begin? Where did it start for you? That's the question. It's the chicken or the egg? That's the eternal question. What do we do with work-life balance? What do we do with workaholics? Now we have a whole different idea of what workaholics means. It used to be something that you stood up and was proud of. But now, what about the time with your family? When do you have time with children? You have to schedule time to have sex with your wife because you're at the job 12, 14, 16-hour days. So with that, I presented a little on both sides of the argument. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? I submit the question to you.
If we have anybody wanting to ask a question, I believe you can raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. Allow you to speak. That sounds kind of now maybe punitive here, but
I also see questions in the Q&A at the bottom.
Okay, we have a hand here.
do we have a participant who would like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. So, I guess my video is off. I don't know if you guys can see me. Sorry about that. It's on.
We can hear you. We can't see you. So
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, technical technical difficulties, I guess. Okay, well, I am here. I posted a question in the Q&A, and thank you to Michael because I found that to be tremendously informative and a lot hit really close to home for me. And I guess one of my questions to him was, because he's just very knowledgeable, is what his opinion was on, you know, I'd like to call it everyone kind of starting to lean on the study drugs or go towards the study drugs as being an answer in law school, and whether it proliferates into the career is another question. But I was wondering, did he feel that the extra time that one is allotted during the LSAT and then for law school exams, does he feel that like that is a cause or has any correlation with the increase of people doing this, of going on to the study drugs or falling back onto them and feeling that they're inadequate on their own without them?
Well, the proliferation of the use of these drugs has impacted not just law school, but colleges in general. And a lot of people have gone to their doctors and been able to show up as specialized students because they need these drugs, or the doctor writes a note for them that they need these drugs due to ADD or ADHD, and they do get extra time. So there is an abuse of the system. There hasn't been a study that talks about how abusive people have been with the system, but there's no question there are people out there abusing the system. Does that answer your question?
No, yes, I just wanted to know what you felt. Yeah, it does answer my question, because just personally, I had several friends that, you know, didn't have ADD, didn't do so well 1L year, and then all of a sudden, you know, to me, they're my friends, but they would tell me, they're like, I just got a doctor to say that I have ADD, and now I have extra time, and then they ended up doing much better in school, and it just left, like, for me, who, you know, I didn't go that route. It just felt weird as being like, you know, law school is competitive, and then you start feeling that like people are getting an unfair advantage, and then you start even thinking like, should I be doing it? But no, yeah, that does answer my question, and it's just interesting that you're actually raising that it's like a problem where most of the school that I go, like a school I'm from, and my psychiatrist and stuff act like it's the solution, and that it's a completely normal thing. So thank you for sharing that knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Nope, my pleasure.
And Mr. Barton, if I may step in for a moment, there was a wonderful Netflix original documentary that came out in 2018 called Take Your Pills. So if you have a Netflix account, I highly recommend this documentary. It doesn't go into specifically law school, but it does detail sort of the issues that we've discussed here with Mr. Nias' presentation about the hyper-competitive nature of academics generally, and talking about how study drugs like Adderall, like Ritalin, like what we've discussed here, eventually may lead to more difficult consequences later on.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just because the disturbing trend is I have younger people asking me, they're like, I was told by my friend, let's just call him Adam, that I should get an ADD script so I can get double time on my LSAT so I can get a better scholarship. And what should I do? And I just try to tell them, you know, from my own recovery standpoint, that going on a drug you don't need is probably not the best thing, but consult your doctor. So, okay, thank you very much. I wrote down that documentary, so definitely will give it a look.
Right. And I want to address one of our anonymous attendees put in the question and answer that as a person who suffers from ADHD, life has been improved due to ADHD medication. And I agree with this anonymous attendee that let's not lump everybody together within the, because you take study drugs, therefore you're a problem. There is absolutely a need for ADHD diagnosis to be legitimate. And if you legitimately do have issues, the drugs should be of help. However, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Nias, what we're discussing are people who use Ritalin, Adderall, and drugs of the similar sort specifically to gain a competitive advantage when they otherwise might not require it.
Yes, that's, I wasn't trying to stigmatize people who need these medicines. There's a difference, and that's what we're trying to draw a line between those who use it legitimately and those who abuse it or use it for to get an advantage.
Thank you, Michael. And I just want to move us along to our next presenter soon, but I'm looking at the comment box and question and answer. We have a lot of nice comments, a lot of people appreciating the presentation by Mr. Nias. And, you know, I did notice one on there that says are the duties between men and women, household duties and differences often in homes cause more difficulty for women. We have a Friday stress relief group with Scott. Dr. Weinstein facilitates with Lauren Morris. That's good for, you can find the link on our website or just contact us. We will send it to you. But that's been an excellent group. Mothers working as attorneys. It's a whole different ballgame for many of you, and we encourage you to join. We have several other questions I wish we could address, but we simply cannot. And I wanted to quickly note that we want, Michael, I wanted to thank you, of course. Thank you very much. And it was, Michael, as usual, I mentioned the personal relationship I have with you. Well, you also hit a personal note for me because, you know, you reminded me that with the 21 and 24-year-old that I have at home that I wouldn't mind if they were workaholics. I got to remember to be nice to them. You know, if they took their band, I secretly might rejoice. But, you know, thanks, Michael. Thank you very much. And I do need to take 1 minute here to thank some sponsors who made today possible and who will make ongoing things possible for Florida Lawyers Assistance. We get very generous support from some sponsors. Specifically to the Hagen Kilby Foundation, which means that support goes directly to the individuals who are Florida lawyers, and particularly those who might be struggling. So law firms, I already mentioned Schutz and Bowen. They've been very generous, very cooperative with us, and they've given us Lewis today to help us with the tech. He's been with us all day, and I really appreciate them. Butler, Weinmiller, Katz and Craig of Tampa, another sponsor that doesn't just sponsor us during the event, but all year long, provides service and help and financial support. Morgan and Morgan, being very generous. They're not in Tampa or in Miami or anywhere. In fact, they're all over, and they may be representing alien life forms in other galaxies by this point, but I'm not sure. And treatment providers. So we have Lakeview Health in Jacksonville, reaching out to us, trying to help Florida lawyers, professionals program, Recovery Keys, skilled with treating professionals, Orlando Recovery Center. These are all, Recovery Keys is St. Augustine and Jacksonville, Lakeview Health is Jacksonville, and Orlando Recovery Center has their primary center in Orlando, of course, and has some satellites around the state, but anxious to help us and help lawyers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Weinstein and let Scott introduce our next speaker. Dr. Weinstein?